I'm casual, I'm an independent expert, and I used to be a top 50 hacker at Standoff 365. This presentation is for beginner hackers who want to make their own pen test tool and to motivate the more experienced pen testers and hackers to publish their scripts and software in open source. This report, this presentation has a license, and by watching this, you agree to this license. Please raise your hands who have already uploaded their scripts on GitHub. Great. And of those who raised your hands, can you please speak in a couple of words about them? Can I have a microphone? Who raised their hands? Oh, you don't want to speak anymore? Okay, it seems that people are shying away. Anyway. What is open source and free software? Open source software is software that you can use for any purpose, but the source code of which you can view and modify and distribute. Free software is the software that implements the main freedoms, quote-unquote, of software as written in the GNU. And the freedoms are the freedom to launch a program for any purposes, the freedom to modify the program, the freedom to distribute copies, and freedom to distribute modified versions. Does this look like something familiar? So does that mean that open source equals free software? Not quite. The difference is in the ideology of programmers. And we need to talk about two communities, open source community and free software foundation. In the latter case, it's not open, but software is not open, but it's free.
Free software.
So what is the difference? The difference is in the ideology of coders, in the philosophy of coders, in their priority. For open source developers, the goal is to develop a reliable free tool that could replace commercial competition. And the goal of free coders is to develop a tool that would provide the freedoms that have been described. Okay, still not clear, but let me explain. Say there's a calculator on Android. That's an open source software. That is open source. It has a permissive license, and I'll talk about that later. You can't just take the source code, download it, compile it, and update the calculator software on your phone. Problem is, we cannot install calculator ourselves. There are two ways to go about it. You can use, for example, different firmware, but who uses custom firmware on Android? I can only see a couple of hands going up. So, where the vendor sets the rules, it's even worse. Because they can modify the calculator in such a way that it would be proprietary, and you won't be able to modify the source code, nor you would be able to install it on your smartphone. And here's how you get root on Xiaomi flagship phone. And to do that, you need to wait for a month. Had this been free software with a relevant license, you would have been able to update it much faster. There's a very obvious solution: to install your calculator as a simple app. But I don't agree with that for a couple of reasons. First is that I don't like some garbage apps on my phone that I don't need, that I choose not to have.
Не новый случай. Я не люблю не знать, что установлено на моем телефоне.
And second, I don't like it when I don't know what is installed on my phone. There were instances when some backdoor software was installed. And if you connect to Google services, then Google owns your phone. Google sends your photograph to their service to check for banned content. They have access to your phone in real time. They have access to your passwords. They can block your phone. So literally, it's Orwell's 1984.
Но возвращаясь к open source.
Let's go back to open source. Let's discuss licenses. A license is needed to protect the developer from user actions. And you have two options in open source, either permissive license or copyleft. A permissive license is one that provides the full freedoms, and that's it. It's similar to copyleft, but it doesn't prevent corporations from modifying your code. They can modify your code, and that code is no longer yours. Whereas with copyleft, a company must publish any version of the software as open source for public access. Let's talk about how your life will change if you start writing open source projects. The disadvantages is the lack of understanding with other people, because joint development is communication. You may have problems with communication, you may miscommunicate, and the advantages are many. First, motivation. By developing a small solution for your task, you can share it with the world. And you can give it to all people, and all people would see that their life has become easier. So you're helping the world. You gain more recognition in the community, and you will be invited to events, and you will be offered jobs. By the way, by the person who covered Metasploit was invited to work at a good company. If you do open source projects, you would already have a good portfolio when you want to apply for a job. At one of my last interview, they asked me to send them my GitHub link. By doing open source projects, you don't just improve as coders, but also as pentesters, because you could be asked to implement some changes that would improve your projects. HDMove, the developer of Metasploit, started writing better exploits while he was working on Metasploit. And finally, the quality of code. When you write code for yourself, you end up writing bad code. But if you write a code with the idea that anyone could look at it, you would write better code. This is called the Hawthorne effect in psychology. Okay, now let's discuss the advantages and the disadvantages for the user. First, there can be no support, and you want to implement a project in a month. So once I improved a project for a YouTuber, but they ended up not using that and abandoned the project. The next security, downloading an open source project is equal to downloading a hacker software if you haven't reviewed it. And there's the exib library, who has been a real backdoor for a while. There is no guarantee. Only the user is responsible. If your software breaks something, only the user is to blame for having used it. And there may be no documentation to use the software. Once I found a very specific library in Python that I needed for my task, but there was virtually no documentation. And to complete that project, I had to review the source code and understand what it does and how. Now the benefits, the price, it comes for free. Platforms, open source projects often run on more platforms than proprietary solutions. For example, Adobe runs only on Windows and Mac OS, but an open source analog runs on Linux and even on Android. Ownership. The user owns the software. No one can take it away from them. There was recently a case when a musician who bought something like FL Studio 10 years ago could not reactivate it because their computer got broken and new software was published, and licensing mechanisms changed, and support did not want to help him. And they wanted not the newest version of the program, but their particular one. Security. Back to security. The user can check themselves that the program, the software is secure. Going back to Exim, a researcher found that the library was vulnerable and reported it. But had it been proprietary software, we may have not even known about it. Customization. A user can change default parameters that they don't like, or they can remove the extra windows. It is up to them. It's fully customizable. And finally, community. A user can help improve the project, even if they are not a developer. Proposals and discussions of features support by other users. You can do a lot to help the community. Developers of Foxmox virtualization environments get more support from their users for the open source solution than from corporate users. Because users come up with pieces of code that resolve the issues in the existing software. And let's now discuss an example of how to write a cool hacker tool. And our hero is HD Move, developer of Metasploit. In 1990s, he was 18, and back then he got his first job as a pen tester. At that time, it was difficult to find exploits. Now that we can Google, type in the software, the version, and look for exploits. At that time, you had to look through various chats and ask people, and that's when he started developing Metasploit. It is a software where you can choose exploits. It's packed with exploits, and you simply type in the input parameters and run it. Question to the audience. Imagine you are the boss of an InfoSec company, and your employee shows you a tool that could help anyone hack any company. What would you do? Please raise your hand. Can we have a microphone here?
Здесь.
Сюда выйти, пожалуйста. Просто там фонят колонки.
Ну, я бы, разумеется, поднял ему зарплату и отправил бы сертифицировать эту историю.
Well, I would raise their pay, and I would use that software in our proprietary code so that no one else could make money on it. Well, that's a great answer. Any other versions. Because this is business, I would try and commercialize it. I would try and agree with the developer to get ownership of the code and then sell it. Okay, thank you. Any other ideas? Let's listen to one more version.
В правильных руках это, конечно же, инструмент, который защитит множество компаний.
In good hands, that could be a tool that could protect many, and in bad hands, that's a cyber weapon. And when he showed it to his boss, he wasn't quite enthusiastic about this tool. He had fear of it because he had fear of consequences.
Потому что он вел большинство активных пентестов.
But at the same time, he couldn't get rid of more because he conducted a lot of active pen tests. And so when
Серьезные народные волнения.
Metasploit.com started out as open source, there was a lot of fuss about it. Black hat hackers, darknet hackers, other pen testers
Что Мув просто крадет их работу.
thought that Moore was
Все, кому это не нравится, пытались
taking away their jobs.
положить сайт.
And those who didn't like it tried to hack or break the
Взломать сайт, поэтому взломал провайдера Мува.
website. And they couldn't, so they hacked
Подралачу также сам Мув.
Moore's provider.
Личность, активность сети.
And Moore also experienced the consequences of that. He experienced attempts of identity theft, and his boss also received letters of firing Moore because publishing exploits is
Было неприятно.
irresponsible.
Было неприятно вендорам.
But vendors
Если компания Мура хотела
also didn't like it.
Вендор хотел, чтобы не было эксплойтов в Metasploit.
If Moore's company wanted to work with the vendors, they wanted that Metasploit didn't have exploits. Governments were not happy.
В случае, если его ночью заберут участок.
And Moore had to have savings so that he had some money if he was taken to the police precinct during night. And when Moore had a pregnant wife and he had debts, Rapid7 offered him to buy Metasploit. And so today we have an open source and a proprietary version of Metasploit. And Moore got an excellent job and a company that could protect it. The
Даже в школах.
company has gone through hatred of
И у него своя компания.
the whole world, but now it's taught in schools. Now he left that company and he has one of his own. Okay, so let's now have a crasher course so that when you go out of this audience, you were able to do your open source project. The programming language. We could start a holy war, but I guess that the best language is English. With English, you can learn whatever you want. But if you don't know where to start, I suggest that you start with Golang, but please don't show this mascot to your friends. How do you learn it? I don't like monotonously studying language, so I suggest you just start and code or read others' codes. That's how you learn. But if you don't know how to go about it, if this is your first programming language, pun intended, I suggest that you go as follows. First is how you launch Golang on your computer. Second is a tour of Golang. And third is the training course, which is example-based.
Итак, как, собственно, программировать?
So how do you code? If you think that coders just sit and write code, they write code like this. Well, it sounds funny, but you've got to learn how to Google. And there are 4 simple rules for that. First is that we Google in English. That would make your search much more effective. Second, the structure of your queries should be the programming language and what you want. And if you didn't find the answer, then ask differently. You can ask ChatGPT to rephrase the question, but please don't ask ChatGPT to give you an answer. And finally, don't ask for help others if you don't spend at least 25 minutes on a forum or a platform.
Итак, слово про операционку.
A few words about the operating system.
Использовать GNU Linux.
I suggest that you use GNU Linux. As simple as that.
Теперь, что такое Git?
Okay, now what is Git? Git is a system of version control. It helps you roll back your software to a previous version, to a previous saving point. It also helps
То есть много разработчиков.
multiple developers to work on one and the same code and one and the same piece of software.
Сервисы для доступа к Git-репозиториям. GitHub.
There is
Остановимся.
access to various Git repositories, and the biggest one is GitHub, and we'll talk about it a bit today.
Итак, теперь сам гайд.
Now to the guidelines themselves.
Мы регистрируемся на GitHub.
Okay, we register with GitHub.
Затем мы создаем репозиторий.
Then we create a repository.
Описание и тыкаем, что у нас будет readme файл.
We write a name and we tick the box that will have a README file.
Мы выбираем лицензию.
Then we select the license.
Пермиссив лицензию, к примеру, MIT license.
We choose the permissive license,
Компилация лицензии, к примеру, GNU GPL v3.
MIT license or GNU General Public License, if you want your software to be free software. Now we clone this to our computer. For that, we click the green button which says code, and GitHub gives us an SSH link. We copy it to our console.
Да, нет, fingerprint.
And then it asks us something, fingerprints, yes, no. We answer yes. If we get an error that a public key or a permission is not available, that is because GitHub doesn't have a public key. That's what it tells us.
Мы опять же заходим в терминал.
So we go to the terminal again and we write SSH keygen, and it generates the public key.
Выводим его.
You copy it, you use the cat command, and you click the link that
Туда мы вставляем наш SSH-ключ.
we're being offered. We copy there the SSH key,
Репозиторий.
and now we can work with the repository.
Сможем обновлять, загружать изменения на репозитории.
And we'll also be able to upload changes to the repository. So that's a form of authorization.
Нам нужно ставить план разработки.
Next, develop a development plan. And it's quite straightforward. We need to understand what features we need,
Данные.
what input data we need.
Разбить функции на шаги. То
We
есть,
need to
поэтапно
break functions into steps,
поставить приоритет для этих функций. У нас будет
prioritize those functions, and we'll have three priorities: the essential functions, the additional functions, and improvements.
Итак, пример функции,
Example
который я хочу вам предложить.
of a function in a software.
Программу, которая будет проверять
I want to
работу DDoS на сайте.
write
То есть она будет
a piece of software that would determine if
время ответа.
DDoS works with a website.
И через некоторое время
So it would make queries and get the response time.
это DOS-чекер.
So let's call it a DOS checker.
Далее нам нужно получить, точнее, воспользоваться, неправильно все говорю, но, допустим, я хочу, чтобы у нас был красивый терминал
Okay.
интерфейс, который еще будет
Suppose
отображать время ответа сервера.
I want to have
Режим мониторинга.
a nice terminal interface that would also print the server response time. That would be our monitoring modes. And we'll need custom headers, especially if we want to break something.
Поддержка пост-запросов и
It would also be good to have post requests plus body.
дальше, чтобы мы могли отдебажить наш проект,
So that we could debug
добавим поддержку HTTP proxy.
our project, we have to add support of HTTP proxy. And to
Отображалось,
make it look good,
будем иметь, сделаем среднее время ответа. То
we
есть,
want to have an average response time. We'll measure average response time. We'll make several queries
получим их среднее время ответа, чтобы это
and
был более точный ответ.
would get the average response time.
Далее, какие входные данные нам нужны?
What input data do we need? We need a link that we want to break. we need the type of request, get or post. Let's say that it's get by default. If it's a post request, we need the body of the request or the query. We need the HTTP proxy link and whether we launch in a monitoring mode. Now the steps for the DOS checker. First, we need to get a link from the terminal. Then we need to write it into a variable to make a GET request to that link, to get the response time from the server, to write this value into a variable, to let the user start the attack, and to iterate, to send the GET request, to assign the value to the variable. We compare the variables, and if the second one is better than the first one, then the attack is successful. Okay, so with the HTTP proxy, we get the variable. If the variable is not empty, then we set it as a proxy in all functions. Post request, post query plus body. If post flag is there, then we use the body query. Headers. If flag non-empty, then we add it to all headers that make queries. And the monitoring mode. We find the library for a nice presentation of terminal interface, etc. Now we need to prioritize. The necessary functions are DOS checker and HTTP proxy for debugging. We also need additional functions, average response time and post requests, queries. And improvements would be custom headers and monitoring modes. 5. Start developing your software with essential functions. So you just sit down and write the function that you want to write. Google will help you. But here's what could happen. Or rather, when you build this function, you debug it, and you want to upload it to GitHub. Here's what could happen. You add a change to the repository using git add. And if you put a dot, then all of the files in the folder are added. Then we submit those changes with git commit, with a comment to the change if needed. However, Git tells us that it doesn't know who we are. So we want to use the commands that it suggests, git config, and we need to type in our username and our email. Then we repeat git commit, and then we use git push to push our changes, and they will be available on GitHub. Then we write the README file. The README file is a text file that describes your project, and this is the first thing that your potential user sees. It should have answers to the following questions: what the project does, what is the use case, how do you install it and try it, and what features it has and how to use them, the documentation. Let me share with you my example of product OwnCloud Brute Forcer.
I have found this open source cloud service, OwnCloud, and they say they can deploy it at home. Well, I tried a few times and I saw that I could authorize without blocking 10 times a second. Okay, then I decided to deal with the account repository, to brute force these accounts and get a bounty pay for this. So to authorize with the OwnCloud, you need this SCRF token from the body of the query, the cookie from the headers, and the client headers. So I want to write a brute force program which will use the files with passwords, and I want to break into several users. So I have a file with users. Okay, for OwnCloud, you need to get new CCF tokens and cookies. So this is quite straightforward. I need to get the input data through the terminal, through the dash U.
переменную в нашу программу,
We get this variable for our software.
где мы должны получить входные данные.
Here we need the input data.
В случае, если мы атакуем
So if we
юзера,
attack
одного определенного юзера под каким-то
one user with a given name,
дефис L,
then we say flag
группу юзеров,
L, and if
то дефис большая.
we say that
Атаковать это.
we attack a file, then we use a hyphen file, and we can also attack the admin. And this is what it looks like. So we just have this link with the CSRF tokens and cookies. Then we send a request for the logging. For this, we need to use some Linux commands.
Затем мы
Then
страниц логина
we
обычняем
use the grabber to see whether we need the token for the login
с
page.
помощью тех же регулярных.
And then we use the regulars to get the cookies from the headers, and then we enter them into the variables.
Листы использовать.
We also
Пример листа это Q.
need this lists, word lists, and here is what it looks like and how our program reads it.
Будет брать каждый пароль для того, чтобы
So we take every password to try to use it for authorization.
Далее. Я хочу,
And then
чтобы была параллельно
I want my program
какое-то количество воркеров,
to run in parallel, so that several workers, several parallel processes should run at the same time and try to authorize. So this is the pseudocode of the final solution, and now let's go into
так мы получаем токены cookie.
detail. So these are the tokens and cookies we get. So we have a function which will get the tokens CSRF tokens and cookies for us. So we are talking about every worker trying to authorize. So now we'll try to authorize it. So we have a function which takes everything, the link, the login page, the proxy, the token, the user, we attack the password, well, the assumed password, and then we try to authorized or login.
Функция password означает true.
So if we are successful, then the function is true. If we are not, then the function is false.
Мы завершаем все
So if we found the password, then we stop the run of all the other workers.
В разработке я заметил, что очень неудобно дебажить программу.
Development, it's really difficult to debug the software when it shows you the response from the server. Like we couldn't authorize to the unique headers.
Нам нужна еще поддержка HTTP.
Okay, so we need the support of the HTTP proxy, and that's what I did.
Берем бурф, вставляем
So
программу ссылку бурфа,
we add the link
и в бурфе мы
for
получаем все
HTTP
наши
proxy, and we get all our packets here. So they are our requests.
Во время разработки было много багов.
And here we had many bugs, and this is the most unexpected one.
Channels — это каналы.
So we are using channels here,
Суть канала в том, что
and the idea of a channel is that it is used to send variables from one part to another part, and often they work in parallel.
channel как труба.
Well, channels are like a pipe. You get variables from one end, and they go out the other end.
То есть пропадает из этой трубки.
And they kind of go away from this pipe.
Трубку можно положить
And
какой-то
you can
элемент,
put
который
several variables into this pipe or channel.
И что отлично подходит в моем случае.
And it works really well to get passwords from this pipe. So we flow 15 million passwords into the pipe, and every worker gets its own password to be used.
Итак, теперь вопрос к аудитории.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Да. Вопрос к аудитории. Расскажите мне, пожалуйста, какая проблема в этом псевдокоде?
What's the problem in this pseudo code? This bug will take all your RAM. You have 3 minutes for your ideas. Please go ahead.
Можно, пожалуйста, дать человеку?
Please give him the mic. Well, I think the path will be generated as a new entity, and they will not remove it from the memory, and that's how they will take all your RAM. Any other ideas? Thank you very much. We have another idea, as far as I understand. Okay, we read the whole file, we load it to the RAM, and only then we start dealing with it. So we have a word list of 30 gigabytes, and we bring it to the RAM, and this is not very nice. A good idea, but not exactly that. So let's take the final try. I can give you a hint. You can fix the problem with this.
Я хочу сразу еще сказать то, что мы это все делаем в цикле.
And we are doing it in a cyclic mode.
Ничего не появилось новых предположений?
Any other ideas?
Ладно. Суть в том, что
Okay. The idea is that the garbage collector
функция Go, которая
is
позволяет
a Go function to remove the unused variables from the memory, cannot keep up. Yeah, one back. Cannot keep up with our rate of creating channels with 15 million variables.
что достаточно многовато.
But this is too much for it.
Garbage collector
And even if we have a garbage collector,
по 250 мегабайт
well,
оперативы.
we take 250 megabytes of the RAM, which is not exactly what I want. That's what brings me to my final solution, and here it is.
То есть мы уменьшили буфер канала до
We have reduced the channel buffer to 1000, and now this is
буфера
an operation
паролями.
running
Освобождается новое место.
this way, so the buffer has 1000 passwords, and then when free space is available, we have new passwords added, and then it makes our software limited to 25 megabytes inside.
Еще не отличное решение.
But this is not the perfect solution yet.
При атаке нового юзера
And it can also run in background. But when we attack a new user, every time we read a password again from the file. But if our hard drive is frail, then we can have some issues. So I have two bugs in my mind. The first one is for slow programming.
Что такое медленное программирование?
What is slow programming? So when you sit down calmly and write the code, not to get the final solution, but to enjoy it,
Много действительно получают
to get high. And many get high from this.
Второй же вариант — это
And-
соответственно культов данных.
And the second one
Не про программирование, но про то, как
is
решать задачи быстрее.
like
Также он короткий и мне очень
the shortest way to do things approach. And I will also share it with you. This is a manifesto, the cult of done. And this goes like that. Take it as it is. Everything you do is not going to be ideal. This is just a draft. You will not have the best code or the best optimized code or documentation in your software.
не существует.
The third idea, you don't have any editing mode. If you think that you quickly code and then you will hone your program, this is either not going to happen or you will have to invest much more time into this. So start with the good code in the first place. The seventh one, if you do something, you forget about it. Like forget about support of your software. You have other things to do. And the eighth one, love at perfection. It's boring and it will not proceed. Well, I'm a perfectionist myself, but perfection can take all your life. Failure is also a result. Make failures. So you can write software, it can be bad, but you still benefit because next time you'll make it better. So please do make mistakes and learn from them, get better. Okay, so there are two approaches, as you have seen, and I alternate between them. And the interesting thing is how OwnCloud responds to my software. Okay, I have the brute force for passwords, and I also have I have another program which works like that. It can take all my processors. So this is another processor capacity. This is another mistake. This is how it works, and you can use the QR code to have a live presentation.
Итак, резюмируя доклад, вы сегодня узнали,
Okay,
что такое open source,
we have talked about open source, the types of licenses and free software. What will happen if you have a cool hacker tool and how you write it. So you have the Git repository, you have the development plan, you set priorities for functions and functions of the program, you split this into the smallest parts possible, and you start coding.
А теперь небольшой комментарий трек Blitz. Первое. Чего не хватает в современных профессиональных сообществах?
Okay, what are we missing from the communities, professional communities today? I think we lack openness. Pen testers don't share the methodology for the pen test.
Особенно если речь идет про
Especially if we are talking about short, concise versions.
Поэтому я пишу их для себя и
That's why I write them for myself and publish them in my blog. The second thing,
кстати, что проекты, которые ты описал в докладе, не были созданы. Как бы ты решил?
how would you solve the problem if you hadn't had this projects? I talked about Metasploit, Git, Golang, and my software. So Metasploit impacted the world a lot, the InfoSec world a lot. So if it hadn't changed, the development of history, I would have used exploit DB. It has a lot of exploits from Metasploit. So programmers would have to share products through zip archives without GitHub, and this would be a hell, and development would take 10 times longer. And I would use the control version in the cloud, but there are some issues
И в случае же
too.
Golang я бы
And for
написал сейчас
Golang, I think I would be using C++ and Python, and I would be switching over to Rust. And the final thing is one cloud brute force. If I hadn't written it, this would work as scripts. And the third thing, what open source project you would love to do if you had more time or resources? Well, I have already started doing this, but it is on pause. This is Ruina, my recon automation for pen test. The first version will be available in open source and mentioned in my blog.
И еще.
And one more thing.
Так как вы молодцы и досмотрели мой доклад до конца,
Since you have survived the whole of my speech,
лицензию, которую
I invite you to adhere to the license you agreed to. So this is item 7.
этичными хакерами,
Be an ethical hacker, share your source code, call your mother and say something good to her.
источники.
Here are the sources.
Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you for your attention.
Также еще по этому QR-коду вы можете
And you can use this QR code for a quick feedback.
видеть материалы,
And you can also see the materials for this and also the transcript.
вопросы.
So now let's have questions.
Давайте будем чередовать. Сначала давайте вопросы из зала, а потом
Okay,
из планшета брать.
let's start with the live questions, and then I will read them from the tablet. We will alternate them. Please give the mic to this guy.
Здравствуйте.
Hello. Hi.
То, что написали брутфорсе.
You said that you have a brute force because you couldn't find a utility for the brute. Okay, you said that you coded a brute force because you couldn't find a utility for brute. What about a hydra, medusa, potato, or pipe intruder? Well, the idea is that they have some issues. They cannot take the CRSF token from the login page, from the body of the page, and this causes the issues. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Теперь вопрос онлайн.
Okay, now I have an online question. Specific examples of using open source tools or libraries to make pentesters work more effective.
Мне вам сказать просто все библиотеки.
Well, shall I mention all the libraries and tools pentesters use? Well, almost all of them are open source. Well, specific examples?
Я бы сказал про
Well,
Discovery.
I would say Project Discovery. They have really cool utilities
Finder,
like SoftFunder, Nabu, Nuclear, a mainstream one.
Но опять же, с Nuclear вы не сможете
But with Nuclear,
ничего больше, если сами не будете писать
you will have to
темплейты.
make your own templates for it to work.
Вижу там человек
Okay,
в конце.
a live question. I can see a hand raised.
Спасибо за доклад. Вопрос.
Thank you.
Новичку проще всего будет начать
Well, a newbie,
все с нуля.
should he or she start from scratch, like code a brute force, or should he combine a Frankenstein based on the tools of third parties? And if we have some ready tools as parts of the final tool, what should we use as a selection criteria for these bits and pieces? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys?
Я рекомендую,
Okay, I suggest.
либо ты предлагаешь использовать скрипты,
Okay,
грубо говоря,
either you use the scripts
самому писать программы,
or you code software with libraries, right?
писать полностью с нуля,
Or do you mean the whole library from scratch?
рабочую программу. Я вижу вот эти три варианта.
I see
и в
three
случае, если ты
options.
хочешь- Вот,
And
слышно?
okay, now they can
Если
hear
ты
me.
хочешь,
If you,
слышно.
by the way, did you hear me before?
Если же ты
Yeah.
хочешь,
Okay. If you want
прям с нуля изучить, как это все
to learn how it works, from ground level up,
досконально это все работает, прям с нуля, то
just from the grassroots,
и потом смотри, как это
please start coding manually and then have a look at some other ideas developed by others. But if you want to be quicker, use some libraries for coding your software. But if you want to join Pentest and to use ready tools, please write scripts.
Теперь вопрос из
Okay, now the online question.
заблокировался, я не могу открыть.
Okay, now it's blocked. How can I open it?
Можете ли вы дать рекомендации по выбору языков программирования и инструментов для разработки программ?
Programming languages.
Схожий вопрос.
Okay, similar question.
Выбор языков программирования и инструментов для разработки программ.
And tools to develop pen test tools based on open source.
В целом я могу посоветовать, опять же, Golang и
I would say Golang and Rust.
там достаточно
For
много библиотек.
Golang, there are quite a lot of libraries there, and you can use third-party code there easily.
Project Discovery.
Also, Project Discovery, they have great tools, and for all the tools, they have
Немножечко местами как
libraries, but sometimes not neatly arranged. And for Rust and Golang, for instance, there are some books like Black Hat for Golang and Rust, but I haven't read either, by the way. Any other live questions?
Так сказать, интерактив в обратную сторону. Я так понял, вы любите взаимодействие с аудиторией.
Okay, you like dealing with the audience, and I have a word of caution for you. Since, as far as I understand, you like paradoxes and cognitive biases, we have this survival bias, be it open source, free software, or business. We can see it right, left, and center. About 10 years ago, a developer of a free software project spoke to one media where he said, well, guys, I will put my project on pause, but I have nothing to eat. I have kids to feed, you know. And you know what the project was?
Знаете ли вы, кто
Do you
такой
know
Вернер Кох?
Werner Koch?
Нет, не скажу.
No, I'm not sure.
Пользуетесь ли вы ГПГ?
Do you use GPG? What is GPG? So this is privacy guard. This is an open implementation which is used, I think, in every package distributor. They use it to verify signature when you install a package. When any user, even without knowing this, installs something on a Linux machine, even this goes well with Android or something. So this is keys and signatures verification. So this was the developer of this GPG, the only one. Well, then he got some donates, including from some big corporations. Well, but Jim Rohn, okay, good job. But, you know, it doesn't always work like that, irrespective of the importance of their contribution. Well, I think you know this, that this is a fundamental project. And, you know, people like Werner Koch, well, they are multiple. And these are sad stories, and we hear them often from the business people. Well, unfortunately, they are like an exception, not the rule. Please think about it, because sometimes you just fall into oblivion. Nobody knows. Those who develop the whole software everyone is using every day without even thinking about it. Yeah. Absolutely. Making money in open source is not a likely option, especially in the Russian segment of it. So it can be a part-time job, or it can be just a hobby or out of altruism. Yeah, the sad thing is that these are real people, you know, and it's on their shoulders that all software is working on now. You know, so these are not perks, this is the software, and which just helps us run the hardware. Okay, thank you. Absolutely. How can you test a hacker tool? I had a QR link. There you can have a look at my presentation. And while speaking, I gave a link to my tool. We have, for instance, Metasploit. You need GitHub and some Google capabilities. Hello, thank you. You're welcome. Okay, we have a tool, and it's not full of holes. How shall we promote it so that it should be noticed? If, say, our GitHub page is not too popular, shall we speak at a conference or what? Yeah, you can speak. Then you can spread somewhere, say in Reddit, but it should be a ready piece of software. And you can also promote it through conferences. So you can tell people, we have this tool, and it can help you solve your problem. Now you can say, so you can mention this now, by the way. What is your tool about? Well, I have a programming course. I spread the word. Well, but this was a joke. I don't have a tool, but I want to know what to do with it when it's ready. Well, good luck. We have an online question. Can we use AI to improve hacker tools? Sure, yes. We have some tools using neural networks. And this is an open-ended question. To improve, what do you mean? Well, we have some, like Rascal. It uses not exactly a neural network, but rather some algorithms which can learn based on your behavior, and then, in a way, run some scans. Any live questions? Here is a guy over there.
И еще один вопросик. Мы, когда разрабатываем инструменты,
Another question. When we develop tools, we need to test them. Would you recommend resources where you can find some Docker images or Redis scripts to deploy services apart from WoolHub or something?
Время разработки для тестирования сервисов.
Okay. For testing services.
Уточни, что ты конкретно...
Could you be more specific? Okay, we have a tool. We need to test it, right, to see how well it works. And for this, we need to deploy a vulnerable service. So do you know a place where we have these token images, for instance, so you can run them, quickly test your tool, whether it scans and exploits well, then you can draw conclusions. Are you talking about Docker images for the tool or the Docker image of the vulnerable? Okay, Docker Hub. Well, maybe I'm not an expert in the field, but I use Docker. I got it, thank you. You're welcome.
Вопрос. Онлайн.
Okay, an online question.
Почему именно Golang, а не Python?
Why Golang and not Python?
Да, согласен, Python...
Well, I agree. Python is a little bit more straightforward for the beginners,
Мне в Python не нравится вообще
but
две вещи.
I don't like two things in Python. It's too slow,
Сейчас вроде бы этим плюс-минус решает эту проблему, но у него есть dependency hell.
and
Особенно, когда вы
it also has some dependencies. When you install several dependency libraries,
которые соприкасаются или
when they are not installed properly, it has been fixed more or less, as far as I understand. But I like Go better, you know. Any other questions? Okay, it's time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time, guys. Thank you for your attention.